This is Robert Polenic, the owner of Brutal Iron Gym. I'm here for a video series, part of a video series titled Ask the Trainers. And what this is, it's a video series where myself and the other trainers of Brutal Iron Gym will be kind of discussing topics and questions from each of our perspectives. So in the past I've been giving videos basically from my perspective, and what I wanted to do was to get other people who are educated in the field to get their perspectives involved. And what it is that way you'll kind of understand, if you're going to listen to the four trainers and there's something that every single one of the trainers says, that kind of beats that down to where it'll allow you to realize how important that concept must be if everybody's saying the same thing. So anytime I say something, hopefully it has some credibility, and you'll at least give it some thought. But again, like I said, when more and more people are saying it, it just gives it more validity. So this is my section of the video series in the question of the advice that we would give to our younger selves. So that's basically what that says there. So the premise of the question is, if I were to start over, so start over training, what would I do differently? How would I improve my efforts to get better results? So I personally have been training for 16 years, so I'm 32 years old right now, and I started training when I was 16. So from 15 to 16 I did a lot of push-ups and sit-ups every night, and I thought that that would get me in shape and build me big muscles and give me six-pack abs. Did not work. So a friend of mine had actually called me fat on my 15th birthday. I know, what a good friend. But we were kind of joking around in school and picking on each other, and he called me fat. And I had a moment of kind of like realization where I was like, crap, he's actually right. You know, so I was chubby at the time, and I had, like if you asked me at the time if I had kind of thought about that and was beating myself up over that, I would have said no. Like maybe there were some things I would have wanted to do differently, but I didn't really have any invested efforts into changing my physique at that age, so I just was what I was. So when he said that, and then I had a realization that I couldn't really make a comeback, like be a smart ass in response, was because he was right. So I was like, well, I don't like that. I don't like that somebody can call me something that I don't like a negative term, but they're right. So it's not their fault for calling me that, it's my fault for creating an environment in which that thing is true. So if somebody were to call me lazy, and I had my actions allowed them to think that of me, that's my problem, and I need to get not lazy. So I need to become more active. So anything. So whenever somebody, like if they give you an insult, but that insult is truth, then it's your responsibility, if you don't like that insult, to fix that. So I have no clue why at 15 I took that personal responsibility type approach. It was probably my mom and dad beating that into me when I was younger. So, but it was a really good thing for me, because that was actually my 15th birthday. So I decided that day I didn't like being called fat. So I was going to do push-ups and sit-ups every night, and that was going to get me in shape. I had no clue why push-ups and sit-ups were my thought, but at the time I didn't really know much about lifting weights or anything like that. So it just kind of made sense at the time. So I set a goal to do, I believe it was 200 or 250 push-ups and sit-ups a day. I actually did it for the entire year, and I only missed 10 days in an entire year, which is pretty good. So, and 7 of those were on a Boy Scout trip where I was too embarrassed in front of my friends to do them in front of them. So, which in retrospect, I look back and I'm laughing at myself how I wasn't embarrassed to be fat in front of them, but I was embarrassed to be putting in efforts to get unfat. So now, looking back at it, I should have just did the push-ups and sit-ups those nights as well. So, but that was the journey, like the start of my journey. Then on my 16th birthday, I asked my parents for Christmas, like a birthday/Christmas gift, to get me a weight set for in our basement. So I remember the weight set was $600. So I remember that because it was a lot of money, and my parents loved me enough to spend a stupid amount of money on me on something that they probably thought I was never going to use. So, but it was a weight set that had like a bench. I could do bench pressing at different inclines. I could do overhead presses. There was an area for squats. Yeah, right. I never did squats. I just benched all the time. And then there was a little thing on the end for like leg extensions, leg curls. So basically I did the typical bench every day, do biceps and triceps. And you never did legs and never really thought of doing back. So I did that for quite a few years until I realized I was an idiot, and then I started adding in some other exercises that actually targeted the whole body. So, but that's basically the start of my journey. And some of the things that I would give the advice would be mostly fixing those years. So if I had to look back and say where I messed up the most was probably in the first, like, I'd say 5 years. So, and that's the kind of the point of this video series is if somebody is starting like their journey, I think it would be helpful to see somebody who's already been down the road, what they've learned at the end that they wish they could change. So if you're in that phase where you can still change things, my hope is that you take this advice and run with it and make those changes. So learn from our mistakes instead of having to make your own. So the first piece of advice I have is to actually eat food. So for some reason I thought I was going to be able to build big muscles and have abs by eating nothing all day. So since I said I started when I was kind of chubby, I actually wouldn't have called myself like an obese type of chubby. Like I wasn't a big, 300-pound ball of fat. So I was actually a pretty thin kid because I had no muscle tissue. So like for example, when I graduated high school, I was about 165 pounds, but you could grab rolls of fat around my midsection. So if you were to kind of think of getting it to a typical body fat percentage of like maybe a 12% body fat, I probably would have been maybe 130 pounds, 140. I'd have been very light. So I didn't have a lot of muscle tissue buildup. And a lot of that was because the first 2 years of training with actual weights, I didn't eat any food. So I would get up and usually skip breakfast because I got up really late. I'd go to school, maybe eat some lunch. I'd come home, eat a little bit of supper with my parents, and then I would just lift weights all night. So I was eating like 2 meals, but it wouldn't be very big meals. So they were just whatever I needed to get in. So, and I don't really remember if I was necessarily trying to hide the fact that I wasn't eating a lot of food, but I do remember that I would eat supper so that my mom and dad would see me eating and they wouldn't give me crap and start yelling at me. But I do remember at the time my goal was extreme calorie restriction. So I did not do like a binge and purge process, so I wouldn't have been considered like bulimic, but I was probably on the edge of like anorexic. So I just didn't eat food, and I tried to do that as long as I possibly could till I'd break and eventually have a pig out meal or something. But it would be several weeks where I would be able to kind of restrict food for a long period of time. So I remember when I started at 16, I was about 165, and by the time I graduated high school, I had grown 4 inches and weighed the exact same. So you can kind of put that in perspective is I gained 4 inches of height and but didn't gain any body weight over that time, which is not very good. So that shows that I was really restricting my growth. So, and a little side note that I don't have written on here is I can tell now as I've gotten older, I've had a lot of injuries from lifting weights that I think correlate back to when I was in my developmental stage, just not eating a lot of food. So my tendons and ligaments wouldn't be as strong as they really should have been. So like I've had, I think last time I counted it was like 13 partial muscle tears. I've torn I think 6 or 7 like ligaments. I've broken my collarbone while bench pressing. So I've done a lot of damage to my body lifting weights that I think I would have avoided a lot of those injuries if I had just had a healthier structure from eating properly when I was younger. So, but that's basically the first piece of advice I'd give to my younger self is if I want to go from being chubby to having lean muscle tissue, I need food. I should have been eating food. So the key is I should have been eating the right food. So and that's my first note here. It says eat clean first. So what that means is once I did realize I needed to eat food, I started, drinking a gallon of milk a day. I started eating pizza. So I started just like kind of just consuming food that had a lot of sugars or wasn't necessarily the best building type of calories. So for example, when I graduated high school, I wanted to go to college, I wanted to be bigger. So I finally let myself go to where I'd eat some food. So I realized I'd been working really hard for 2 years, from 16 to 18 years old, and I'd been working really hard, but I didn't look like it. So I was still skinny and I was still soft. So I remember when I was going to college, I was like, okay, fine, if I'm going to be fat, let me be a big fat. Let me get some muscle to me. So I decided to eat food, and one of my goals was to drink a gallon of milk a day. And again, I think I read an article somewhere in like Muscle and Fitness or something like that. And so I drank a gallon of milk a day. I did it for 2 years. I didn't miss a single day in 2 years. So let that sink in. That's a little extreme. So you'll probably hear the word extreme in my habits often in this video. So, but it did help me gain weight. I went from 165 up to like 195. But as you can imagine, with a gallon of milk a day, it wasn't a pretty 195. So I definitely accomplished the goal of staying fat but getting bigger. So I wish now if I would have went back, I would have, not that necessarily milk is the worst thing, it's just I didn't really need all the sugars at that age and at that body size. So that was definitely more calories that I wasn't using. So I was eating too many calories, not using them all, and hoping they would go to muscle, but it was just still too many calories. So maybe I had lifted weights and maybe my daily need would have been an extra, say 400, 500 calories to build the muscle, and I might have been having an extra 1,000. So that excess is going to have to go somewhere. So it got stored as body fat. So that would be my goal. Like if I got to start over, my 16 to 18-year-old self, I would tell myself to eat food. And then when I did start eating food, try eating cleaner foods like farm boy foods like meat and potatoes, meat and rice. Eat some stuff that'll quote unquote stick to your bones but build you some muscle. So I should have stayed away from the sugars and the easy processed foods. So then kind of down here is kind of the specific advice. So I would have aimed, if I was in a phase where I was trying to gain size, I should have eaten enough to where I was gaining on average 4 to 6 pounds per month. So what that equates to is about 1 to 1.5 pounds per week. And that'll allow you to gain weight per month, but it'll be a good amount of muscle and very minimal fat. So it might not sound very fun to work really hard for a whole month and only gain 4 pounds. But if you did that for say six months, that's 24 pounds. That's a significant difference. So, but that's what I would have aimed for. So if I'm telling you guys to eat more, how do you know how much is enough? That's how you know how much. So just eat what you can until you're gaining at a rate of 4 to 6 pounds per month. If you're eating more than that and you're starting to gain 6 to 8 pounds, I would argue that you're probably gaining unnecessary amount of fat, and you don't need to be gaining that much fat. So so stick to healthy, clean foods as much as you can, but at the end of the day, eat enough to gain weight if that's your goal, is gaining weight. So if you think about like when I was 16 to 18, I would have been, like I said, lifting weights to get big and strong, look like Arnold Schwarzenegger, and I gained 4 inches and gained 0 pounds. So that's not how in the world would I have thought I got bigger if I didn't gain any weight. Like how there was, bigness should have added weight to my body. So looking back at it now, I have no clue how I would have rationalized my old thoughts, but somehow you do. So now looking back at it with what I know now, I would like to go back and like slap the 16-year-old and tell him to go up to the kitchen and eat food. So, and then if I was in a cutting phase where I was trying to clean up my body weight, I would aim for that same rate of 4 to 6 pounds per month as coming off of the body. So, for example, I did a diet once. When I had quit drinking the milk, I had gained up to 195. I remember from there I was kind of fluttering around. I think I got up to like 215-ish. And at that weight, I knew I was kind of getting too chunky and I didn't like it. So I remember I did a diet where I was eating boiled chicken and vegetables at every meal, and I was soaking it in hot sauce because that food is disgusting and has no flavor. So that's the only thing I'd eat all day is boiled chicken and frozen vegetables that I would thaw out and then mix that all together and eat that with hot sauce. And I started running. So I'd run, it was at least a mile a day, which for me is a lot because I'm not really a runner by genetics. So, but I was just eating nothing, so boiled chicken and vegetables, and then I was running all the time. And I remember I went from 213 down to like 190, and I looked worse at 190. So I actually lost like 23 pounds and somehow looked fatter. So the reason why was because I lost a ton of muscle tissue, because I was really only eating protein. I wasn't eating any carbs. I wasn't really eating any fats. So my body just started breaking down protein for energy. And it would take the protein it got from the food. If that wasn't enough, which it wasn't, it started breaking down my muscle tissue, which is protein. So I was basically just using protein as fuel, and in the process ended up burning off muscle tissue. So at that rate, I had lost that way faster than I really should have. So those are the kind of pieces of advice, is like when I say to eat food, is what you should be eating is farm boy foods like meats, like potatoes, rice, pasta. Don't be afraid of some healthy fats like steak every once in a while. It's a perfectly fine thing. Fat and eggs. There's whole milk, which is good in moderation. Like I said before, drinking a gallon of milk a day is a little extreme. So just in moderation, that's the good foods to have. And you want to aim for the rate of, if you're gaining size, try to gain 4 to 6 pounds per month. If you're trying to cut weight, only try to cut 4 to 6 pounds per month. Don't take off more than that, because you'll run the risk of taking off muscle tissue. And also, there's a whole long thing I could get into for a whole other video about how you're going to negatively impact your metabolism if you lose too much weight too fast. And it'll actually make weight loss harder as you keep going, and it'll make it harder in the long run in terms of like the next few years of your life. So, but that's the idea of the advice number 1. So advice number 2 here is going to be to get stronger. So when I first started working out at 16, I remember dial-up internet was what I had at my house. So that makes me sound old, but to some of you, you didn't even have internet, so I'm not that old. But I do remember dial-up where all the squeaky noises and all that stuff, and somebody would like pick up the phone and screw up your signal, so you got really angry and scream at them. So, but that's what I had, and I remember the website I used to download videos from was RX Muscle. So RX Muscle was run by Dave Palumbo, and they had videos called In the Iron Asylum, and it was training videos from professional bodybuilders. And that's what I first started lifting weights as the goal of, is I liked Arnold's physique, so of course I want to look like my version of Arnold. So that was the goal, is build big muscles. And in the process of that, like I would often watch these videos, and they were guys who were already big. They were already 300 pounds with abs. So, and they would be bench pressing, and they would be bench pressing like 405 for 10 reps, like these ungodly amount of weights. So, unfortunately, what I learned from those videos was only half of what I needed. So I learned how big people stay big, but I didn't learn how they got big. And there's a huge difference between those two. And unfortunately, I didn't learn that till later in life. But what I took away from those videos was, number 1 was variety. Like I realized they were always doing different angles, different exercises, trying to create a different stimulus on the muscle. And number 2 was, what I only ever saw in the video was like rep ranges of like 10 to 20 reps. So you'd hear them talk about like 8 to 12 at the time. 8 to 12 reps was considered bodybuilding. So, and it wasn't until later on in life that I learned about like time under tension as the more important factor rather than actual repetitions. So for example, I could blast through 8 reps in 8 seconds. That does not mean I'm going to get bigger from that. So it's time under tension that kind of dictates the muscular response as like if you're looking for growth. So, but that's what they always said in the video, was 8 to 12 reps. And then I saw them doing like sets of 15 to 20 for legs, and they just kind of said the legs responded better to heavier weight, higher reps, but they never really explained why. So that's all I ever did. So I did sets of 8 to 12, and then a little bit higher on legs, and I just assumed if I did sets of 10 all the time, that I would eventually be like them and benching 405 for sets of 10. So I never really was exposed to or even heard of strength training. So training at 5 reps or less. So sets of less than or equal to 5 reps. So if I wanted to get stronger, I just thought if I used 60 pounds for 10 reps last week, I have to somehow find a way to do 65 pounds for 10 reps this week. So it never really dawned on me to lower my reps to a lower range to get stronger. Or like for example, if I could do 60s for 12, I would try 65s for maybe 8, and then try to work that up to 12, but I never dropped below 8 reps. So at that time, in all the videos I had watched, it was never even spoken of a bodybuilder going below 8 reps. So now what I know is, I know if I would have worked on getting stronger and then in turn used that new strength in that 10 rep range, I would have gotten bigger faster. So like for example, one of the things that kind of made me aware of that was, like I said, when I graduated high school I weighed 165. I'm currently in this video right now 280, and I've been as high as 295 before. So my goal once was always to get 300, so I've been really close, but I felt too fat at 295 to push it. So, but I was able to gain 130 pounds after the age of 18, so it wasn't like I was really scrawny at 14 and got bigger. So 18, you're supposed to be a grown man. I wasn't even close. But so since then, I have gained an enormous amount of weight. However, I don't have the big pretty muscles that I'd like just yet. So, but what it showed me is if I look over the past 16 years, I was successful in terms of gaining weight. So I did gain 130 pounds in my frame, which is pretty good. So, however, I realized I could have gotten there earlier than 16 years. So I know, like in the first, say, from 16 to 20, I went from like 165 up to like 210, 215-ish. So it's 50 pounds in like 5 years, 4 years. So which isn't too bad. But I know I could have gotten there faster, and I would also be a lot stronger right now if I would have started that when I was younger. So like my recent endeavor for myself has been powerlifting, and I've been getting stronger over the last 5 years of powerlifting. I'll put on average about 100-ish pounds, like 80 to 100 pounds of my total every year in 5 years. But I know I would have been starting a lot stronger, and I probably would have been able to have an even higher amount by now in terms of strength if I would have started at that age. So, and then the other thing I have here is technique. So when I was younger, I did pay attention a lot to the technique of bodybuilding, to where like I didn't throw around the weights, I didn't use momentum, I kept everything very clean, very precise. However, if you'd have asked me how I squatted at that time, I would have just told you I moved the bar up and down. But I wouldn't have been paying attention to if my stance was the right stance for like strength. So if I was squatting for the goal of building bigger quads, I had a narrowed stance, toes forward, high bar position, and I could get my quads to hurt. So as the main focus. But I wouldn't have known how to squat any other way. So what I'd like to have done when I started, if I got to start over again, was learning how to lift for strength, which is a little bit different than lifting for muscular size. So there's an argument there, but I could argue against it, so pretty well. So, but that's the idea, is I would like to go back and focus on the technique of strength training, not only the technique of bodybuilding. So, and to me, that is a difference. And I think over time, like I said, I could have been bigger and stronger faster if I'd have started that way. So, so if you are trying to take this advice and you want to focus on getting stronger, there's a program called 531. So that's the name of the program. It's called 531 by a guy named Jim Wendler. That's Wendler. So Wendler. So Jim Wendler's 531 program was a very good combination of strength training plus muscle size. So he has a couple program options. Like he has one called, you'll see it if you buy it. It's called Boring But Basic. And basically what it is it has the strength training component, and then it has strict bodybuilding, just how do you get big. And that's a program that I really wish, now that I know of it, I would have started with that program when I was younger. So if you're going to take this piece of advice, I would order that program. You can buy it online, it's an ebook. It's relatively cheap, and even if it was $100, I promise you it's worth it. So, but it's 531 by Jim Wendler. So then that'll allow you to figure out how to mix in strength training along with bodybuilding. Okay? So, and it also has technique in there as well. So he has like some descriptions on how to squat, bench, and deadlift with proper form. So let me switch over here. So finally, the last thing is patience. So I was actually a pretty patient person with this. Like I knew it was going to take, not necessarily that it was going to take a long time. I just knew that I enjoyed the process of lifting weights and learning my body. So I knew I'd be doing it for a long time. So I was never in a really big hurry. I wanted to always get enough progress to where I knew I was getting something for my time and effort, but I was never hurrying in a super fast way to try to get to certain goals. So I just kind of let my body kind of dictate what happened and learn from that over the time. So the reason why I decided to include patience was more so for anybody watching who is thinking about taking this advice and actually using it. Most people I work with now as a trainer, they are not patient. So they think they're going to turn pro in 2 years of training. Some of them don't even think it's going to take 2 years, which is insane. So 2 years is already like 5 times too short. So, but it's going to take a while. So you're going to put in a lot of work at first. You might not see a ton of results, or you might get some quick results and then it plateaus. So, but there's going to be some ups and downs. There's going to be some slow times where you feel like you're working harder than what you're getting from it. That's just life. That's the process of this thing. So, so just be patient with it, and learn to enjoy the journey, like learn to enjoy the process and the learning aspects of this endeavor of like lifting weights and getting healthy. So, but that's a big thing. So even now, like later in my career, I've had a ton of injuries when some of them are related to trying to push the limits, but I was more so pushing the limits of my body to test my mind. So if I wanted to get stronger and I'd always been at a certain weight, and I'm like, fine, it's time, I've done the work, I need to try something heavier. And every once in a while you get, bit in the butt and you get an injury. So, but that again is just something that helps you build patience, because now you got to rehab and fix that injury. So, but that's the third piece of advice, is I would just tell you to take time. So be patient with it. So if you're starting this journey and you want to be healthy, you're going to be some form of exercise for the rest of your life. So there's no need to get in a big rush. Just take your time and, like I said, enjoy the journey and learn from it. So journal some stuff, track what you're doing, try to analyze everything, read some research, get some resources, and there'll be some other videos that'll be coming out soon on their channel that'll be talking about who to listen to. So, but one place I'll give you right now is a website called Elite FTS. So it's Elite, like E-L-I-T-E, and then FTS. So EliteFTS.com. They have a ton of stuff for strength training, bodybuilding, proper nutrition, sports like strongman, powerlifting, everything. So they got a whole bunch of stuff on there. The authors are all really educated, very good, experienced people. So that's the first resource I'll tell you to go check out. And then in that resource, if you're reading an article or you're listening to a video or something and they mention another person, go look up that person. So if you're looking to a guy that you know is telling you the right stuff and you like what he's telling you, but he mentioned someone else, go learn about someone else as well. So that's a good resource to start with, is EliteFTS.com. So hopefully this has helped. So that would be my advice to my younger self, is to actually eat some food, and then when you do eat, don't eat crap. So eat some good food. So, and then I would try to get stronger along with trying to get bigger, and realize that those two go hand in hand. So if I get stronger, I can then use heavier weights as a bodybuilding, in the bodybuilding rep scheme. So for example, if I want to get my sets of 10s to ever be heavier, I have to go lower reps, work on my strength, and then apply that new strength back to the 10 reps. And then the last piece of advice is to be patient. So hopefully this video series has helped. So in our video series of Ask the Trainers, we'll be starting a new kind of series and get each trainer's perspective here in the next week or so. So thank you for watching this, and I hope it helped.